This is Neil. If you haven't, were you here before? Did they meet you before?
No, not this semester.
I showed his picture to you, but I think you met him in person. So this is Neil. He's a grad student in our lab and quite an expert at some of the stuff that you guys need to be able to do. So he's going to be explaining to you how to use Blender today. I also just wanted to say before we got started, I sent you guys that thing about AERO last night, the company that's interviewing for flight controllers at NASA. I just want to mention that, a little bit about that because you may not have never heard of them before. But what happens at JSC, Johnson Space Center, is there's most of the employees who work there are contractors for NASA. And whoever the big company is that's handling the contract keeps changing. So when I was there, I worked as a flight controller for a number of years. The company was United Space Alliance at the time. Now it's AERO. Same people, same shift badges have shifted. It's actually now probably the third company since I was there. The name has changed. But these are essentially the folks who are in charge of all the people who are working in the control center across all the disciplines that are in charge of space station systems as well as new systems for Orion and for Deep Space Gateway coming up and so on. So if you're interested at all, they'll be here on Monday, and I think that they'd be a great company to work for. So check it out. I think you have all the information on that flyer to contact you. Anyway, with that, let me hand it over to Neil, and we'll learn about Blender.
Howdy.
Howdy.
Hope you're all excited to be in this 426 class. I remember I took it about 3 years ago, the last time it was offered, and it's a lot more fun than other classes, I think. So today I'm going to go over what Blender, how to work with Blender to model in 3D, and I'm recording it. So if you make a loud sound, you'll probably hear it, or your classmates will, just to let you know. I'll go over what the user interface is like, and how to model something, and also what homework assignment you have. And also, once you model something, how to apply a texture to it so that it's not just a gray block of vertices. Let's see. Let me play these videos. There we go. I think this sound should work. So I'll show you a show reel from SIGGRAPH 2019, which is a conference related to visualization and computer science. So here's, you can see they're doing stuff in 2D and 3D, and in addition to just making models, people make films with it, and it can even be used as a game engine just like Unreal or Unity. I think it's buffering. Let's see. And there's some pretty advanced particle effects and lighting you can do within it. You can do animations. You can have kind of organic models. Here's one of the films made with it. And so that was kind of a view of the end product, and I also want to show you what a time lapse of creating an object looks like. This is a 37-minute video, so I'll just show maybe a minute of it. But you start with a basic user interface where you start with a primitive object. And with Blender, you can either sculpt, like if you're sculpting with clay, and you can edit vertices and things like that. In this example, they're making some sort of rafter. And in the background, they have a reference picture that they're using to kind of trace over. And so that might be something you do, probably not with a dinosaur, but if you have a projected view of some satellite or power box, or that could be done. Or you're probably creating new designs also, so you might just create something on your own. So after blocking out the initial model, they are sculpting it and making it look a little more realistic. And now I'll go over to their texturing. going really fast. So there's brushes you can use to add things like scales, or if you want something to look metallic and kind of grungy, you can do that too. And then after that, you can apply colors to your texture object, which in Blender they're called materials. So here's an example of that. And you can either do it object by object, or you can kind of paint over an object like this. And so I'll just skip to what the end render looks like. And so here in Blender, in addition to creating the model, you can create up a lighting scenario, so you can place virtual lights and cameras in places, almost as if you had a real studio for taking pictures of something. All right, let's go back to full screen. So you're supposed to have a homework assignment. So what I thought of is creating a .fbx file. So that's a 3D model file that works with the Unreal Engine, and you can make that in Blender. And the requirements I want it to have is the model will have to have some sort of texture or UV map, and I want it to be somewhere between 100 and 5,000 polygons. And the main reason for that is if you go too much over 5,000 polygons, that's probably too complex for what you want to do in just a week or a weekend. And it can also be bad for simulations if you have too many vertices and things. And I put the lower limit 100 so you don't just submit a cube or something with 6 faces. And I think it would be good if you create something that's related to your 426 project or topic that you're focusing on. And then also I'm going to show you how to engrave your name or some text in there. So an example of something not to do is just make a donut or a torus and submit it. In the bottom right, you can see the number of faces. This has 336 faces, so it meets the requirement of having more than 1,000 polygons, but it's probably not something you'd be proud of. Yes?
What's a UV map?
I'll explain that in a little bit, but it's basically a way to wrap a texture around a model.
How do you tell how many polygons?
Bottom right hand corner.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see here, but it will be in the bottom right. So something that might be more applicable, something that you could submit is, here's a plug adapter. So maybe you have some sort of power adapter, or you'll probably be creating something bigger like a spacecraft or a habitat. I'm not sure exactly what you want. And then I engraved my name in there. I just extruded some text and put Neil on it. And is that going to be due on Tuesday? I'm not sure what the due date is. What do you think?
Thursday.
Thursday? Okay, so next Thursday. And we can figure out with Tanner how to submit that. I'll talk to him and he'll tell you how to submit it. But it'll either be email or Google Drive, I believe. Okay, so now I'll go over the Blender user interface. And so here's some hotkeys. So there's a normal hotkeys to undo something, just like in Microsoft Word or Windows. If you press Control Z, you can undo something. But redo is a little bit different. You have to press Control Shift and Z to redo something. And it's good if you use a mouse with Blender because you're working in a 3D environment. And here's some common file types. So Blender makes .blend files, and that's just a general 3D file that Blender they've created. And we like to focus on probably you'll often see these kind of files, .obj, stl, and things like that.
Which file format was our homework supposed to be?
The .fbx file format, and so that's the second line up there. And that stands for film box, and it's created by Autodesk. But it's a general format that can contain a 3D model and its animations. And so that helps a lot for stuff we'll probably do later with the simulations. And I'll show you how to export into .fbx from Blender. So the new version of Blender just came out a few months ago called Blender 2.8, and it looks like this. On the left side, we have the Tools panel, and so that's just general tools for translating and rotating. In the middle, you have your 3D viewport. On the top right, you have a navigation gizmo, and this lets you rotate around the scene by clicking on these. And let me go ahead and show you this in Blender, so it's not just a picture. Okay, let me get this up. Alright, so here's my plug adapter, and so in this navigation gizmo up here, if I click this red dot, I'll go into a negative X projection, and I can, this is kind of a sphere you can click and drag around like this to rotate around. And yeah, so anything you see in here, it's pretty intuitive of how to get around just by looking at this navigation gizmo. So let's switch back. Let's see, slides. Okay. And these rows up here is your scene collection, and it lists every single object within your Blender workspace. And then below that you have a details panel, and that shows things like the location of the object you have selected. And whenever you have an object selected, it will be highlighted or outlined in orange. And in the very top you have these workspace tabs, and this lets you switch between modeling and sculpting and UV editing, which is the texturing modes. But for most of what you're doing, you'll probably just stay in the default workspace, the layout workspace. And in the top left you have a mode selector, and this lets you switch between object mode and edit mode. And what that means is object mode is just the default mode where you can select objects or vertices that are grouped together. But if you actually want to edit the geometry, you have to go to edit mode. And there's also a way to switch between the views by using this pie menu if you click tilde. And I have a PDF with all the hotkeys that I've uploaded to Google Drive that you can access later with all these in them, because it's quite a lot to just looking here to remember. Now let me go back to these. Okay, so a fast way to switch between object mode and edit mode is tab, and I'll show what that helps with. Okay, so here is what things look like in object mode. So I can I can move the cursor around. So on the toolbar on the left here, if I select the select tool and left click on things, I'll select different objects. So right now I just have three main objects. It's my name engraved, this plug adapter box, and then the actual metal components. So in object mode, you have these separate objects. You can't really edit them, but you can translate them around like that. But if I actually want to edit the geometry, I can press tab. That'll bring me to edit mode. And when I'm in edit mode, I can see the actual vertices of things. And I can select a certain face by left clicking on a face. So maybe for some reason I want to have this plug be this way or something. I can edit the geometry in here. Okay, so next I'll go into how to actually fly around and navigate around the window. Let's see, go back to my slides. Okay. So the main navigation hotkeys that I use are fly, so it's shift plus tilde, and that basically means if you don't use fly, you'll just be stuck in a view of the object and you won't be able to move the camera around. And if you want to orbit whatever you have selected, you can use the middle mouse button. And then you can also use, if you want to go to projected views, you can use the numpad keys. And so the most common ones I've bolded, so if you want to press 7 to go to a top perspective, So it's the diagonal keys, so 7, 9, 1, and 3. They give you perspective views like that. And if you want to switch to an orthographic view, you can press 5. And so that's probably particularly useful if you're doing some sort of engineering model and you want to see something without any perspective. So let me show what that exactly looks like. Go to Blender. Okay. In the top right here, I can switch to a wireframe mode so you can kind of see the perspective better. And let's go back to object mode. So here's all my polygons. So if I press 5 right now on the numpad, here's the kind of orthographic mode versus perspective mode. So here, if I want a top view like this, or side view, here's the perspective and here's the orthographic. And then here's what it looks like that. And so here, pressing the numpad keys can get you to these views. And one useful one is sometimes you might get stuck and you don't know where you are. If you press the home key, it'll bring you back to put everything in view. And so when you're first starting, I suggest going through these navigation hotkeys, because if you can't navigate around the 3D view, it's kind of hard to model anything. So here those are. Okay, so here's a lot more hotkeys, and instead of just talking about them, I'll show you how to start with a basic cube and make something. So I'll remake this plug receptacle I've made, and I'll go through these as I go along. Yeah, okay. So let me switch back to the Blender view. Yeah. Okay. And let's get this here. Okay. So I'll just save what I had. And so let's create a new project that's general. Okay. And so whenever you create a new project, you'll just start with a cube in the middle. And Blender just puts that there for you so you have something to work with. But you don't have to start with a cube if you don't want. And I don't really want to start with a cube. So just press delete and it'll get rid of it. So here I didn't explain before, the red line that you see is the x-axis and this green line is a y-axis. And z is pointing up. So it's a normal right-handed coordinate system. So first let me go to a top-down view. So I'll press the Z right here. So to create any object, you can press Shift and A. So pressing Shift plus A, and these hotkeys are written down in the sheet I'll give you. You can create a simple geometry. So I'm going to start with just creating a cylinder. And right now it just looks like a circle, but if I go to kind of a angled view, you can see here's a cylinder. So now you're thinking, if you're trying to design a plug adapter like I showed, we can go back and look at it. Let's switch to it. So first you'll want to start with the main objects, or the large shapes that you see, and then work on the details after that. So let's go back there. Okay. So let's say I see my cylinder kind of fits with this, but I'll need to cut it in half and stretch it out like that. Another thing I could have done is started with a plane or a cube and just stretch the cube out and bevel the edges. But I'll just start with stretching out my cylinder to make this shape. So let me show you how to do that. Okay, so since the whole plug was symmetrical, I'll try to do everything just one half of it and mirror the rest so that it's all symmetrical. So here I press tab to go from object mode to edit mode, and when everything is highlighted like this in orange, that means things are selected. And if I want to deselect everything, you can just left click off somewhere else and nothing will be selected. So to stretch everything, first I'm just going to cut everything in half. And the best way to do that is on the left here, there's something called loop cut. And if you hold your mouse over these tools, you'll see the descriptions. So loop cut, it says it cuts a mesh loop, and you can slide it around to cut a loop around different things. So let's click on that. So once you have this tool selected and you hover over things, you'll see these yellow lines that show you where the cuts are. So I want to cut this whole thing kind of so there's two semicircles on the top. So let me go to a different view where I can do that better. So I'll press 7 to go to a top view. And then let's go back to the loop cut. And might be better to do this in object mode. Let's see. Okay, so it's only in edit mode. Okay, so here I'm flying around and getting to different. Okay, so when you cut things, you have to do it on each plane individually. If it's not a similar plane, so let me just make this is kind of the cut I want to make, and then I'll make a cut across the circle also. So I'll just left click this here, and now you can see I've made this cut here. Okay, and then I'm just gonna left click on this face. So if you want to do a face select mode, you can click this up here, this button that says face select. And so I'll select this top face, and you can search through commands if you press space. So here I'm going to type subdivide. So pretty much when you just press space and you can search for commands, and subdivide just divides a face into 2 or 3. Let's see. And let me go to wireframe mode so we can see everything better. Okay. So it looks like the best tool for this might actually be the knife tool. So the knife tool, it lets you cut through a face based on selecting vertices. So in the top left, I'm going to click vertex select, and this lets me see all the different vertices. So to cut this top face, I want to select this vertex right here, and then another vertex across from it. So let me go to the top view. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to click off to deselect everything, and now I'll click the knife tool, and I'll click on this top. Let me zoom in. This top vertex aligned with the y-axis, and here you can see a kind of purple line coming up from it, and that's where the knife cut will be. So it's kind of like if you're cutting a slice of bread or a slice of cheese or something.
So why did you subdivide the two?
I subdivided it so I'd have twice as many vertices, just so that I have more accuracy. Okay, so next I'll click down on this bottom one. And one thing about selecting these, when it's snapped to a vertex, you'll see this little green square outlined in purple, and so that's when you know you selected a vertex, and it tries to snap to the nearest vertex that your mouse is close to. So you can do it even when zoomed out like this. And after you've clicked 2 points, you can press enter, and then it will make the cut. So now I kind of have this cut. And now I'll fly over to the bottom and make that same cut. Okay, so here I select that vertex and then this vertex, and then press enter, and now we have our cylinder cut in half. So the next thing to do is learn about basic translation. So for that, the hotkey to translate something you have selected is G like goat, and so we'll want to translate this left side. And I haven't showed you how to select multiple objects yet. And to do that, you just left click on something, and you can hold shift and click all of these. But instead of having to do so many clicks, you can also use something called the circle select tool. So if you press C, your cursor will change into this circle. Or you can, I believe there's so you can press C and click and drag the circle around whatever you want to select. And you'll be able to select everything that collides with your circle. So here I'll just try to select this half of the cylinder, like that. And then, so now you can see I have half of the cylinder outlined or highlighted in orange. And so the hotkey to move something around is G. So if I press G and drag my mouse, I'll be able to change this. But I want it to be kind of more precise. So if I wanted to translate it across the x-axis, after pressing the G key, I can press X to lock to the x-axis. And those hotkeys are all labeled down here if you ever want to look at them.
If it's cut, why it's still attached?
So I didn't actually detach anything yet. I just cut the faces in half. And so whenever you have one object together, Blender tries to keep it together kind of watertight, if that makes sense, so that you don't have any holes in it. But if I do, once I do drag it like this, I can detach it by just selecting one of these faces and pressing delete. And then now it's just kind of a C shape. Yeah, so that's how to make a basic elongated cylinder like that. And so next I want to get the dimensions, the height dimensions kind of more correct. And so let's go to this view and see. Let's look at the reference picture again and see what it looks like from the side more. Okay, so it's kind of, I might say the height is about half the length of that. Okay, so let's go back to Blender and try to get the dimensions correct. Okay. There you go. So an easy way to scale something is using the scale command, and that's on the tool here is on the left. My camera is blocking the word scale, but this is the scale tool, so you can click scale, and that lets you resize things by percentages. So if I want to scale this down in the Z direction, I can type Z. Whoops. Z. Actually, let me go back to the select tool. A more useful hotkey for scaling is just the key S. S like snake. So if I have my whole object selected by pressing A, I can press S, and that brings up the scale tool. And it just scales everything among all axes like this, but I just want to scale in the Z direction, so I'm going to press the letter Z, like zebra. and here I can just scale things down, and you can, once you have it to a scale you want, you can press your left mouse button, and that stops it from deforming anymore, like that. Yeah, so that's that. And another thing I might want to do is get my origin fixed to the center of this. So let me deselect everything and go back to object mode. And if I click wireframe here, you can kind of see the origin of the world is more on the left side of my receptacle plug. But to move it to the middle, I can snap it back to the middle after. And let me show you how to do that. So actually, let's go back to edit mode, and we'll want to get a vertex in the middle of this square part. So I'll left click. Let's left click on here. So you can see we have more of this shape right now. So if I want to get the center of this, the easiest way would probably be just to get diagonals. So let me do another knife cut, and let's go to vertex selection mode, which is this key up here, and select this vertex, and then this, I believe would be, yeah, this vertex, or let's see. Let me go back to a better projection. So let me press 7 so I can see everything and get everything aligned straight. Okay. So I select these and I'll press enter. So now I have a rectangle here. And instead of actually cutting an X on this, I'm going to press space and type subdivide, and that will split this into 4, just like that. And so now I have a reference vertex for the kind of the center. And now I'll introduce something called the 3D cursor. So let me go back to the slides and tell you what that is. And I'm recording all this, and I'll put it on the Google Drive if you miss anything or if I'm going too fast. Okay, so let's see. Let me skip back to where I was. Modeling. Okay. So the 3D cursor it's not your mouse cursor, but it's a cursor unique to Blender, and it looks like this icon with these red and white stripes, or red and white bars there. And you can kind of think of it as a second origin or a reference point that you can use. So normally when you rotate things, you'll rotate about the object's center, or you can even rotate about the center of mass. But if you want to rotate about some other point, you can say that you want to rotate around the 3D cursor. So if I were rotating this sphere around the 3D cursor, I could kind of orbit around there like that. And what we want to use it for is we'll align the 3D cursor with the center of our plug, and then we'll tell Blender to move the geometry from the 3D cursor location to the real origin. And let me show you what that looks like. So let's go back to Blender. Okay. Oops. Just a second. Let me get this full screen again. Let's see. Oh, I see. I switched to that monitor. Okay. Let me drag back. There we go. Okay. So the 3D cursor tool is just the second tool from the top here. So I'll click that cursor, and anytime you left click when that's selected, you'll be able to specify a new point for the 3D cursor, just like that. And if I want to set the 3D cursor exactly to the point in 3D space where this vertex is, you can see if I just try clicking it, it gets anywhere close to it. It gets close to it, but it's not precise. So the best way to do it is to deselect everything by clicking off And let me go back to a better perspective. Okay, that's fine. And in vertex select mode, so this mode up here, I can just left click on that and I have only this vertex selected. And now I can press spacebar to search for a command, and I'll type snap cursor to selected. And so now my 3D cursor is exactly where that vertex is. And if I want to see where that is in 3D space, I can bring up the details panel by pressing N. And now I can see the transform of that is in the x direction it's negative 1.12 meters. And yeah, I forgot to mention everything in Blender is in meters, which is fine for most things, I guess. So now I have this 3D cursor snapped to the middle of my rectangle here, and I'll want to move that to my origin. So I'm going to go back to object mode, and I'll say I'm going to press spacebar and type snap geometry, or let's see, snap selection. Oh, actually, yeah, let me go back to edit mode. And I think I can, oh yeah, I remember now. Okay, so in object mode, type set origin. And so pretty much we'll set the local origin of our device to where the 3D cursor is. And so I type set origin and then origin to 3D cursor. And so that's set the origin of this to right here. And that means, so there's pretty much the Blender origin is wherever this these axes are intersecting. And then there's a local origin for just where the reference point for your object is. So if I want to snap this origin to the world origin, I can just say snap selection. Okay, so let me move I'm going to snap my cursor to the world origin. And so that moves my 3D cursor to the world origin in here. And now I'm going to press spacebar and type snap selection to cursor. And so that gets me kind of centered right there. So now that I have this on the top plane, now I can make a good, the top part of the plug. Okay, so let's go back to the picture that I had. Let's see. Okay. So for this part, it looks like it's just some sort of six-sided shape that I can extrude out, and then here's 2 more cylinders. So I'll show you how to do that. Pretty much how to add other geometry to existing geometry. Okay, so let's start with that part. Blender. Okay. So for this, I'll teach you how to use the extrude tool, and if you use SolidWorks, it's kind of similar where you can have a 2D shape or a sketch and extrude out of that to make a 3D shape. Okay, so let me go back to my top view like that, and let's see. Let's get centered here. And let me go over some of the hotkeys again for movement, just in case you're trying to follow along and you're getting stuck. So the one I want to go over right now is how to pan around the view. And so I'll have that. So it's a shift and your middle mouse button. So that means you can translate your camera view over the scene, and that's helpful for if you're in orthographic view and don't want to get out of that. You don't want to change the perspective. And again, to fly around like I was doing, you can press Shift plus tilde. So let's go here. Blender. So here I use shift in the middle mouse button and I'll get this. And I'm gonna left click out of this to deselect everything. I'm gonna go back to edit mode, and I want to have that shape, kind of the hexagon shape there. So I'll press Shift A, and I'll make a plane right here, and I'll snap this to the origin so it's kind of in the center. So the same way I did earlier, you can press spacebar and type snap cursor to world origin, and then spacebar again and type snap selected to cursor. So that gets that there. And if I press S, I can scale this down, kind of like that. And I'm going to click in the top edge select mode and select this top edge. And to split this in half, I can use subdivide. So I'll type subdivide, and that splits that line in two. I'll do the same thing for here. And so something interesting you can do with the scale tool is you can select two vertices by left clicking, holding shift and left clicking the other one. And the scale tool will scale out from your cursor here. So if I press S, I can make this into a hexagon, like that kind of. And then I'd say it's bigger than that, so I'm going to select all these vertices and just scale this out some. And the useful thing about Blender is you can edit the geometry either by changing where edges are. So if you want to drag an edge like this, you can do that. Or you can drag a vertex like this. There's two selected, so let me just select one. Like that. And here I'm left clicking to select it and I'm pressing G to translate something. Or you can select a whole face and move it around. Kind of like, if I wanted to select this whole face and move it around, I could. So now we'll want to extrude this upwards to get more accurate to what our reference model is. So all I have to do for that is this extrude region tool here. And I'll probably want to get into a side view for this so I can see how far up to go. So I press the green Y button in the navigation gizmo up here, and I'll press extrude region, and here you can click and drag the arrow that pops up to make it however tall you want. So that's that. And now if I'll look, it's a 3D shape that we made from a 2D plane that we had there. Okay, and next I'll quickly do the two prongs that are on the top. And so the hard part about this is making sure you get them aligned correctly. And so I'll show you how to do that. So I'm in edit mode and I'm in face select here. So you can see this whole face. It doesn't have any vertexes in the middle we can reference. So I'm just going to use the knife tool on the left here and cut based on these vertexes. So there's one cut, and then I'll do another cut right here. And after that, let's see exactly where those prongs are, how offset they are from the vertices. So let's see. Okay. Yeah, so they're about a little bit inwards, and there's ways you can overlay a projection. If you have an image, you can put it in Blender and use that instead of just guessing. But for now, I'll just show you how to do it like this. So I'm gonna create a I'm gonna split this square right here. Let me switch to Blender. Here we go. I'm gonna split this square into more squares. So to do that, I'll go back to face select mode. Right here. Okay. Face select mode, and let me select this face, and I'll press space and type subdivide to subdivide this, and let's see if that worked. Let's go back to this. Okay, let me do that again. Subdivide. Okay, so right now it's just subdividing the edges. I mean the lines on the side. So now that I've subdivided those, I'm just gonna do a knife cut, kind of 3/4, 1/4 and 3/4 distance from the edges, like that. Okay. And so this gives me some kind of guidelines of where to place the cylinders I want to extrude. I'll make a cut here also, and let's see. Okay, that's fine. So what I can do is just render a circle here and there, and I'll try to get them not all the way touching to here. So I'm going to go to vertex select mode, select this vertex, and then type the command snap cursor to selected. And so now when I press Shift A and make a circle, it will be rendered about this 3D cursor point. So right now it's kind of big, but I can press S for scale and type decimal point 0.01 to make it 1/100th of the size. Maybe that's too small, so I'll press S again and then scale it by 3, maybe 4 or 5. You can kind of play around. So let's make it 5 times bigger, and there's a circle there. And one thing I haven't showed you yet is the mirror tool, or the mirror modifier, and that can help a lot so you don't have to redo things twice. So I'm actually gonna make these prongs a different object. So if you have your circle that you just made selected, if you are following along, you can separate it from your object by pressing spacebar and type separate. And I'm going to do separate by selection. And so now if I go into object mode, in the top right you can see there's a cylinder and cylinder 0.001. And that's kind of confusing, so let me just name this prong object. And my cylinder, which is my basic cylinder I started with, I'll just call that the plug box. And you can also select objects in the scene selector up here by just left clicking on them. Let's see, oops. Let's see, what did I do? Let me go back. Okay. So, I accidentally closed the window. Let me reset my. Yeah, this is fine. So yeah, here's this here. What I just did, I switched to the modeling workspace, and that's very similar to the layout workspace. But it's useful if you want to have more than one view or something. So this is what it looks like if it's sculpting, and they try to give you a texture that's kind of like clay for that. So I'll go back to modeling here, and so what I'll do is I'm just gonna select my prong object here in object mode, and right now that's just a circle. Let's see. Okay, and now on the right side of this details panel there's a little wrench here, and using that, it's a modifier tab. So what that means is you can add something called a mirror modifier to mirror everything over an axis. So in this case I want to mirror my prongs about the x-axis so that I have one on each side. So you're on the right side, I'm going to press add modifier after clicking this wrench icon. And then if you press add modifier, there's a lot of things, and you'll just have to look for mirror. And it's here in the second row, kind of in the middle way down, or the second column. In this mirror modifier, you have a lot of options, but the main thing that we want is just to mirror about the x-axis. But right now I have y selected. You might be thinking, if I want to mirror about x, what do I have y selected? It's because my this is in reference to the local coordinates of my object, and these axes you see here, where x is red, that's the world coordinates. So sometimes you just have to play around and see if you don't know what your local coordinates are, and or your local axes. So here you can see I've mirrored that circle about the local y-axis, and now it's on both sides. Okay, so now that mirror modifier has been made, I'll go back to edit and I'll just extrude this. And whatever I do to this one on the left side will also happen to the one on the right side. So let's extrude here. See, let me go back here. Let's actually do a different way this time. Press spacebar and type extrude, and I'll do so you'll see a lot of different options for extrusion, more than just what we saw in the tool before. So I'm going to do extrude only vertices because we only have vertices right now pretty much. And so that makes this happen. And I can press Z, so it's only along the Z axis. And so you can see there's no faces because we only extruded the vertices. So I'm just showing another option of extruding. But we actually do want the faces, so the default option is extrude and move on normal. So it's just going to move normal to the plane that it's on. And instead of guessing something, maybe I want it to be 10 centimeters tall. So I can just type 10 and then cm. And it'll extrude it that way. But it looks like it's in the x-axis, so I'll type z. And now it's in the z. And let's see how big, if that's too big, it probably is. Yeah. Yeah. But that doesn't matter because you can just I can just press S and scale in the Z direction by 0.1. Oh, I don't have it selected. Okay, so I'm gonna press A and I'll scale it by, I'll type 0.01. Oops. I want in the Z direction. Okay, so S to scale and then Z to scale in the Z direction. What's happening? Okay. I'll just redo the extrusion and extrude it with my mouse. So extrude, then I press the letter Z on the keyboard and just move it up this much. Okay. And the last thing I'll do for this modeling section is just add a hemisphere on top of this. So to get precise placement for that, I want to put my 3D cursor in the center of this cylinder. So, and I'll also want to make sure my sphere has the same number of vertexes as this. Okay, so let me left click off this to deselect everything, and I'll go back to a top down view, then I'll hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan this way. So now here's the top down view. And so yeah, my cursor, it almost looks like it's in the center, and it is in the top view, but it's actually lower down in the Z axis. If I show you here, oops, it's down there, but I wanted to get it up here. So all I have to do for that is create a new vertex in the center here at the right Z height. So I'll left click this vertex, I'll hold shift and left click this other vertex, and I can press F to create a new line. Or if you have, F is the general key to create a new face or a new line if you have things selected. So I just created the line here. Now that I have this line, which Blender calls them edges, I'll just subdivide this to get, or pretty much bisect the line, and now I have a vertex in the middle here. Let me go to vertex mode, and let me left click to select that vertex, then I'll press space and snap cursor to selected, and so now I have the 3D cursor there. And again, the 3D cursor, when you're creating objects by pressing Shift A, the 3D cursor will serve as the origin for the object. So I can say create icosphere mesh, and it's centered there. And you can see there's 2 because it's mirrored. So I'm just going to scale this down by pressing S and typing 0.1, and then I can scale down some. And so there's a kind of a basic prongs there. So that's all I'm going to show you for modeling right now. It might take a little bit more. Usually it wouldn't take this long, but I'm explaining how to do things. And next I'll show you how to texture it and put your name on it, and that's quite a bit quicker because it only requires a few clicks to texture something. So earlier I showed you switching between wireframe and kind of solid mode, but for seeing textures you can go to a material mode and a rendered mode that actually has shadows versus just the solid. So here I'll just stay in this rendered mode, which is the very right kind of sphere right here. And to add a material to something or pretty much change what color it is, all you have to do is go back to object mode in the top left, have your object selected, and then in the bottom, the second from the bottom icon here, which is the material tab, you can create a new material or a new kind of texture by pressing plus new here. And I'll just call this, I'll click on this here and type prong _m for prong material. And you can change the color by just clicking base color here and selecting a color. So I'll just kind of have this kind of yellow, just in case it's gold or plated with something. And now, since I'm in object mode, I can click something else. So here's my box. I'll create a material for that also. And in my example, I had a blue color, so I'll do that also. Okay, so that's all you really have to do to get a basic color on something. And now let me explain what UV mapping is, because you'll need to map out how a texture wraps around something to get it to work in the Unreal Engine or something else. So I have some pictures in the slides of what UV mapping is. Okay, here's the slides, and let me skip ahead to where we were. So sorry if there's too many flashes. Okay. So I already talked about polygons earlier. So here's different polygons, and they can be split into triangles. It's pretty much any kind of basic shape like a square or something with edges connected together. Here's different levels of detail. And let me go to the UV mapping part. Okay. So on the left we have some cubes, and if you see that checkerboard pattern, that's an example of a texture. In 3D rendering, your computer has to know how a 2D texture is mapped to a 3D object. So if you see this right here, you kind of see this block T shape, or just this T shape of where the texture is flat. Blender can create a UV map, or pretty much a map of how a 2D texture wraps around something. And this U and V are used because it's kind of in the X and Y direction, but UV kind of, if you're taking controls courses of velocities and things like that. Anyway, so if you don't have something UV mapped and the computer doesn't know how to texture something, you'll just have something that looks like this on the right, whereas you want something that looks like this on the left. Okay, so yeah, this is from The Last of Us, a video game. Okay, so we only have about 10 minutes, I guess, so let me show you how to UV map something real quick and add your name to it so you know how to do everything for the homework. Let me switch back to the Blender view. Okay. So right now you're either in the layout or modeling workspace. To UV map something or map the texture, click on this UV editing tab up here. And in this you have on the left kind of a 2D view of something. On the right is your 3D viewport. And the controls are similar, you can fly around in this. But what this is used for is you can select an individual object. So here I'll go to object mode. I'll left click on something that I want to UV map. I'll press U. Actually, I'll press space and type UV. And then look for something called Smart UV Project. And that means Blender is going to automatically project this in whatever projection it thinks is best. And I'll just press enter twice. Now if I go to edit mode, you can see it's my hemispheres have been mapped here, and my kind of the vertical parts of the prong are here. And if you want to see how this UV map corresponds to the 3D model, all you have to do is you can go to face select and left click on certain faces, and you can see how if you plug in a 2D image here, how it would map to the 3D object. And now you have to do that for each different object. So now I'll click on this prong box, which is my only other object right now. I'll press space, I'll type UV, look for Smart UV Project. I'll press enter twice. And if I go back to edit mode and select everything, you can see my prong box is UV mapped, or my plug. And so all of this data is stored within a .fbx file, and whatever you export it to, the program will know how the textures can map to the 3D model. And if you don't do this, and if you're trying to do something like put the American flag on your model, it'll be all stretched out or warped probably. Okay. Now let me show you how to put your name on something. And I mainly just put that in there so we know you didn't download something and just submit it. Okay. So I'll left click off to have nothing selected. And I want to place my name around here somewhere. So to do that, I want to align my 3D cursor with somewhere on this plane. So let me actually go to, let's see, let me press home. Okay, so I pressed home, and I'm in this projected view. But let me just go to the Y face by clicking Y on the gizmo here. I'll hold Shift and the middle mouse button to pan around. And I'm gonna I have this box selected. I'll press Tab to go to edit mode so I can see the vertexes. Let me go to the solid mode so I can see better. And I'll want to have my name centered right here. So let me just create an edge here again. So I'll select this face and type subdivide. And that just subdivided my edges, I believe. Okay, yeah, so now I have a vertex here and a vertex there. I'll use the knife tool again that I showed earlier. And it's not quite straight. That's okay, I just want to have something, some intersection here. So I'll just create an edge from here to here regardless of its orientation. And I'll go to edge select, and let me get out of the knife tool, and let's just select this edge. I'm going to type subdivide, to get something, a vertex in the center of that, and I'll left click this vertex and type snap cursor to selected. And so now I have, oops, now I have my 3D cursor on that plane. I can go back to object mode and create my text, and the text will spawn, be created wherever that cursor is. So I'll press Shift A and look for text. So text is right here. And so now my text origin is right there. And I'm going to press R to rotate it so it looks correct. And let's say rotate about the x-axis by 90 degrees. I'm going to rotate it about the z-axis by 180 so it's facing the right way. So I press R to rotate, Z to rotate about the z-axis, and I'll type in 180 to do that. And to edit text, you just go to edit mode, so I'll press tab. I'll type in Neil right there. Okay, and I'll go back to object mode. So now you see Neil is here. To extrude something, so extrude text, you can go to this text tab here and look for geometry. It's right here, and there's an extrude command. So I'll just type how much is 1 meter. Let's see. So that's 1 meter. So I'll just do, if something's in meters, you can actually change it to centimeters by typing centimeters. So let me type 50 centimeters and see what that is. So that's that. So now I have Neil here. Okay. And so now I can just press G and translate it around until I get it to where I want it. And if I go back to the rendered mode, you can see that's there. And again, to add a material to something, you can click this little material tab right there. Press new and make it whatever color you want. And so there's options in here. Instead of just putting a color on it, you can put a texture on it. But I think that's too advanced for today. And I can send out some YouTube videos if you want to actually add a texture to it, because you probably will for your models. Now let me show you how to export it as an FBX file. And this is what it looks like so far. And if you want to see how many vertices you have, you can press A to select everything. Right now, mine says I have 1,051 vertices. So that's above, that's about enough, I guess, for what we want. With everything selected, I'll press File in the top left, and Export, and FBX. So yeah, FBX again. File export FBX to make an FBX model out of what you have in the viewport. Then you kind of have all these, just your file directory, and you can save it as an FBX file. So here I'll name it Neil _McHenry plug adapter. And so there's settings here, and you don't have to worry about them too much right now, but if you ever want to change how your coordinate system is set up, so if the z-axis is actually pointing down, because you might want that, you can set that here. So for there you would put negative z up, if that makes sense. So your up axis would be negative z and things like that. But you don't have to change any of this for now too much. You can just name it and then press export FBX and know where you save it. And so then that FBX file will have all these textures or these colors and the objects separated in different parts. And you might also want to save the Blender file if you want to edit it also. And let me see what else I had. Anything useful that you might want to look at on the slides that I didn't cover. Okay, slides. So I had some of these slides talking about normal mapping, which lets you still have a low polygon count, but make something look like it has a lot of bumps and textures. So you might want to look at that. And then if you want to learn more about Blender, you just go to blender.org and look at the manual. So I have some links to some YouTube channels that have good tutorials if you want to look at them. But I think that's it for today. So I'll just put the homework up again just in case you didn't get it. So you'll submit this by next Thursday, and I'll have Tanner give you the details on how to submit it. Thank you.
They can just download Blender, right? It's just go online and it's free.
Yes, that's right.
All right, thank you guys, and have a good weekend.